Before we start, spoiler alert, this is a video intended to be watched by people who know about all of Undertale's endings. If you haven't seen some of the content and want to avoid the spoilers, I would suggest you close this video and come back later. Okay, did everyone leave? Good, let's begin. So this video is basically going to be a list of various stuff that you may find to your liking if you completed and enjoyed Undertale. I'm dividing the things I'm talking about in categories, and you can find a table of contents in the description in case you wanna quickly see them or jump to one in particular. So, first category, theories and secrets. Anyone that has played Undertale knows that it likes to hide some stuff, like Flowey being Asriel, Sans being as powerful as shown in the genocide route, or Toriel being the queen of the underground. But while some of its secrets are discovered by playing normally, there are a huge number of small interactions and easter eggs hidden throughout the game, and it's very likely that you've missed some of them, and if you like the game, there's a high chance you'll find them interesting. Listing all of them would take me forever, so instead of doing that, I'll just give some starting points you can start investigating from. Did you try to go back to the beginning of the game right after defeating Asriel in the true Pacifist ending? Did you ever hear all of Papyrus' and Undyne's possible phone calls? Did you ever manage to open the mysterious door in the Snowdin Forest? Did you ever manage to enter Sansa's room? Did you find interaction between Nabstablook's music and Aaron and Washra? Have you heard of the fan value? Ever heard of the name W.D. Gaster? Or about the narrator Kara theory? What about the Sans being a human theory? If these things catch your interest, there are some great videos made by great YouTubers that list secrets, theories, and interesting information about the game. Like for example, Syyborg Gaming made 2 videos called 10 Things You Didn't Know About Undertale and 10 More Things You Didn't Know About Undertale that I personally found quite interesting, so I recommend checking them out. Moving on to the next category, fan games. Undertale touched the heart of many players, and some of them made their own games based on the Undertale world or style. Here are some of the ones I enjoyed the most. First of all, we have Undertale RED, made by Taxiderby, which is a standalone application that lets you experience a fight with a character named Red, supposedly a member of the Royal Guard. It's one of the most famous Undertale fan games, and for good reasons. It's very polished and very well done, and has a lot of small secrets, hidden interactions, and cool stuff. In the description you can find a link to the Reddit thread from which you will be able to download it. We also have Undertale ARIN, created by Unicorn, which is a small fight against an original character that doesn't really have a lot of content, but it's quite polished and it can be entertaining. You can play it online from the link in the description. There's also 2 fan games made by Zacalot, one featuring a Gaster fight and another one featuring a Pacifist Sans fight plus another encounter. In both games you are going to fight very hard battles, similar to those you can find in the genocide route, so if you enjoy getting your ass kicked, I highly suggest you try them. In the description you can find a link to the Reddit threads from which you can download them. Also worth mentioning is the existence of Unitale, a Lua moddable Undertale based engine made by Ivkuln that lets you make your own Undertale battles. In the description you can find a link to the subreddit thread from which you can download it and browse games made using this engine. There are many more Undertale fan games of course, and more are gonna be made in the future. For instance, apparently BYEdik Zykov is working on a 2.5D Undertale, so if you like the idea I highly recommend you to try and search for some on your own. And with that, we move on to the next category, which is similar games. Basically, I'm going to talk a bit about games that you might like if you like playing Undertale, because they are similar in a way or another. First of all, we have the games from the Mother saga, RPG games known for their sense of humor and originality, as well as for having the setting of the game to be a modern one instead of a medieval one, which was quite uncommon when the video game industry was still young. I haven't played the first one, and the fourth one, which is a fan game and not an official installment, is still in development, but I have played the second and third games. The second installment, Mother 2, is a SNES game also known as Earthbound, as that's the name the game has out of Japan. It's a quite entertaining game, though I highly recommend thinking about playing it with a guide, since there are multiple times in which knowing exactly what to do can be a bit difficult. Also, some of the battles can be quite tough, so have in mind that you may have to do some grinding at certain points in the game. Overall though, I found it a game with many entertaining characters, enemies and situations, and a story that, despite not being that deep or interesting, had some really nice touches. The third installment, Mother 3, is a Game Boy Advance game, and as of the beginning of 2016, it hasn't been released out of Japan, despite some rumors about its Western release being floating in the air. But fortunately, thanks to some really cool people, we have a fan translation available. You can find a link to it in the description. In my opinion, it's better than Earthbound in almost every single way, so I highly recommend checking this one out. The story is a lot better, I like the characters more, the combats are more entertaining, etc. In comparison with Earthbound, this one also has some relatively dark moments. Similar to Undertale also is an RPG Maker game called Lisa, also known as Lisa the Painful. It's a side-scrolling RPG set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland that can have a pretty dark tone, dwelling on subjects like drug addiction, suicide, and having mechanics like playing Russian roulette with your party members for money, at the risk of them permanently dying. It has very interesting characters and situations, and some pretty unique mechanics, and it also dwells on subjects related to morality. It has a prequel known as Lisa the First, and a sequel in the form of a DLC known as Lisa the Joyful, so if you like this one, consider checking the other ones out. We also have another RPG Maker game called Off, a surreal RPG game that I think can only be described with one word: weird. It has quite a complex world and story, as well as interesting characters, but a lot of how the world works and what the characters do is never explicitly stated. A lot of what happens in the world of Off is open to interpretation, which has created a lot of theories around it. Also, at some points the game can be a little bit disturbing in certain aspects. Expect a certain degree of fourth wall breaking. The game has generated a lot of fan games inspired in the world it presents too. Getting to the last RPG Maker game, we have a game called Oneshot, an exploration game focused on puzzles and narrative that has no combat, but has a very interesting way of telling the story and breaking the fourth wall, as well as quite some interesting characters in my opinion. It also features permanent choices, so be careful with what you do. To close this category, I recommend playing The Wall Ends With You, also known as It's a Wonderful World in Japan. Developed by Square Enix and Jupiter, it's a Nintendo DS RPG game with a unique combat system set in the modern Japan that in my opinion has extremely good characters, story and music. It feels very polished and well done and has a lot of interesting mechanics. I don't really want to spoil anything, but I really recommend trying this one out. And with that we finish this category and we can move on to the last one. Before I actually begin with this category though, I wanted to make a honorable mention, which is a written story. I didn't want to make a category just for this because I only know one, but I wanted to mention it at some point in the video. I'm talking about the One by One story by Courier. It's a story that offers an alternative to the true pacifist ending and kind of tries to give a more definitive conclusion to some characters that don't get one in that ending, like Kara or Asriel. I have to say, Courier establishes certain things as canon for the story that can't be confirmed or are very unlikely in the original Undertale, but at least to me it didn't bother me the slightest while reading it, and I found it very entertaining and well written. You'll find a link to read it in the description. So now officially starting the comics, blogs and alternate universes category, we'll begin with one of the most famous ones, the Dreemur Reborn blog, made by Fatz. The Dreemur Reborn blog presents the idea of what would happen if Frisk was able to sacrifice his own soul and give it to Asriel at the end of a true pacifist run in order to save him. In this scenario, Asriel and Frisk share Asriel's body, and they reunite with the rest of the Undertale cast to go to the surface. The blog features a variety of comics with storylines and standalone illustrations organized in a story archive, and it's very polished and well done in my opinion. Highly recommend checking it out. Second, we have the Life on the Surface blog, which is a blog with illustrations and comics that take place in a post-pacifist ending. It features a comic in which Frisk returns to the underground once more after such ending for certain purposes, among other things. The blog has a link to the main comic in the navigation tab, but if you want to browse all the images in chronological order, you're going to have to add Chrono to the address. For those not familiar with Tumblr, allow me to explain, since this is a handy way to chronologically navigate Tumblr blogs. When you are in a Tumblr blog, as long as the posts in that blog have tags, you can add /tagged/ name of the tag /chrono to the web address and you will be able to see all the posts within that blog that have that tag in chronological order. In most of the blogs featured in this video you can use Undertale as the name of the tag and it will work nicely, but you don't always need to do it this way since some blogs already feature their own links to read from the beginning or navigate through the blog. Moving on, we have the God's Son blog, made by Soupery. It started as an Ask blog for post-pacifist Asriel, but eventually developed a storyline in which Asriel is saved and features comics and illustrations from that event and what happens after that event. In general, the tone of the comics is pretty happy, trying to deliver a happy ending for the cast, and the comics are very nice. Also, the comics offer people the possibility of making choices to affect their story while they're being made, through polls. The official web has links to the main stories of the blog. We also have the Man Who Speaks in Hands blog, which is a role-playing blog that features Gaster as a host, a character you may or may not have heard about. I mentioned him at the beginning of the video. There's very little known about this character, and a lot of who the character is, how he behaves, and stuff like that is based on theories. The blog answers to Ask posts staying in character and with drawings, has some comics with the storylines, and overall depicts Gaster kind of like a nice man that has suffered a cruel fate. Next, we have the Half-Hearted Dreamers blog. It's a role-playing blog that has Asriel and Frisk as hosts and has some comics and a storyline. It takes place on a supposed scenario based around the idea that if a human soul has the power of many monster souls, it can be shattered in many monster souls, and thus, Frisk gives part of his soul to Asriel after a true pacifist ending to save him, becoming a monster too in the process. The asks are answered by using Undertale text boxes and sprites, some custom and others taken from the game. The blog also tries to add some background to Frisk's character. Next stop, the Aftertale comic, and this is kind of a tricky one because there are actually two comics named Aftertale. One of them is a comic created by Lover of Piggies that dwells on the events that go on during a genocide run, how Sans reacts to them, and the difference between Kara and Frisk. Kind of. I couldn't think of another explanation that wasn't vague enough to not spoil anything, but was informative enough. Sorry. The same Lover of Piggies is also the creator of the character Error Sans, supposedly a Sans that hunts glitches in order to exterminate them, that has its own official role-playing ask blog, in which the asks are answered through drawings and there are some storylines. If you don't mind the original characters, I recommend checking it out, it's pretty nice. The second Aftertale comic is a comic created by Tewinus that takes place years after a true pacifist ending, with the main character falling into the underground and trying to go back home, kind of like in the original story. The main characters are original characters, but even if you normally don't like original characters, I recommend checking this one out. The Undertale vibe is very strong. Also, a lot of the comic feels like a game. Dialogues progress a lot through text boxes, you have an inventory, there are exploration phases, a hidden mechanic readers can use. While being made, the author often offers the readers choices about what to do next, whether through the comment section or polls. Moving on, allow me to present Undertale Parallel, which features the Undertale story from a different timeline in which Asriel didn't die and grew up in the underground, and so when Frisk falls, they meet. The story is told through custom sprites that emulate the style of the scenes in the actual game, and while the author had some trouble using English at the beginning of the story, later on the errors end up disappearing. Just for your information, this one also features some original characters. The next comic I wanted to talk about is the comic The Thought. Done by Tratser, it features the story of a Sans that at one point decides that the best possible course of action is killing Frisk at the beginning of his journey, and using the human souls himself to free the monsters once and for all, which ends up with some unwanted consequences. I really like the style on this one, and you can find a link to the comic in Tratser's Tumblr, or alternatively there's a direct link in the description. I also think you may enjoy the blog known as Flowey and Frisk, under the address of I'll Try to Be Good. Created by Jackie, also known as Lady Artist among other names, it's an ask blog for a post-pacifist ending in which Frisk left the underground not only with the rest of the cast, but with Flowey too, and it features different comics based on that situation. You can find an organized archive on the official blog in the Save Files option. And finally, last but not least, we have the Soulful Asriel comic. Created by Scott Fraser, it's a comic focused on Asriel, who years after a true pacifist ending is somehow finally able to recover his body, to find out that things have changed. The story advances through text boxes and drawings, and the readers have the capability of sort of altering Asriel's status through asks sent to the blog, which affects the storyline. I don't really want to specify how this works because I feel it would ruin the surprise of discovering it, and it's something I found very interesting. To wrap things up, I'll just say that if you are more interested in alternate universes and blogs and such, in the description you'll find a link to a Reddit thread made by Media La Starla that has a very complete list of them, and even links to more lists. There's plenty for everyone, and with that, we reach the end of the video. Thanks for staying until now, I hope you liked it and I hope you like the things you decide to try. Remember, don't kill and don't be killed. Until next time!